Take it there, who gon' take it there, who gon' take it there, who gon' take it there? Electricity, 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 electricity. You know what's in the air, you know what's in the air, you know what's in the air, you know what's in the air. It's possibility, it's possibility, it's possibility, it's possibility.
So a couple different things that I want to talk about today, loosely related. The first of which is something that I talked about yesterday in my most recent episode, which was about Cenk and his Rebellion PAC. So this is a new PAC, not actually new, it's existed previously, but we'll get to that in a second. Basically, this is a new project from Cenk Uygur of the Young Turks to try to pull the Democratic Party in a more populist direction by funding candidates through this PAC that agree to 6 core principles, populist principles, stuff like a higher wage, paid family leave, no more wars, which is an important one, and a couple others. So that was the project. One of the people involved in this project, the executive director of Rebellion PAC, is Brianna Wu, who I mentioned in this previous episode. She is a commentator who's been around since the sort of Gamergate era, where she emerged as somebody who, was speaking to the experience of female gamers in a context where the gaming community was being hostilely claimed by the essentially, incel crowd, people like that went on to be Ian Miles Chong and people like that. Even Steve Bannon had a hand in Gamergate. That was one of the first online phenomenon that let the right know that there was a bunch of young, angry men out there that could be targeted and grouped together to create a politically powerful movement. So Brianna Wu emerged from that and, was kind of a firebrand, progressive type who ran for office and other things. But ultimately moderated her views in the modern era. The past few years of politics, has decided that she's against trans people in sports, even though she herself is a trans woman, and that she is heavily pro-Israel despite the bombardment and genocidal action that Israel has been taking in Palestine. She is a vocal supporter of Israel. So these are very interesting and important wedge issues when it comes to the Democratic Party and whatever this progressive coalition is. I mean, the controversy within the Democratic Party, not so much within, normal and conscientious, thoughtful people, empathetic people, but in the Democratic Party, the conversation is, is it tenable to continue supporting these social issues like trans people in sports? Or, is there any room in this party to even acknowledge Palestinian voices, the Palestinian struggle? I mean, they were shut out from speaking at the DNC, even under the most favorable conditions to the DNC. And they were just not into that, not even open to entertaining that. And I believe that the Democrats' refusal to acknowledge the Palestinian genocide, the genocide in Gaza, as being like an absolutely formative issue in this previous election is largely to blame for the reason that they lost. Not identifying how important that issue is, I think killed a lot of the youth vote for them. And they should have been able to pull that out. And so Brianna Wu represents an interesting part of the so-called left-wing, coalition, where she represents this new non-woke style of supposedly progressive politics, which is kind of a contradiction. And ultimately, it's focused on this idea of populism. So she started this PAC before Cenk ever was supposedly a part of it, or I think she has been the executive director of it for going back a few years, and only recently did she step down in the last day. So Cenk announced this whole Rebellion PAC thing yesterday, and as of today, Brianna Wu has stepped down She said it's because of vocal issues that she has and surgeries that she's going to be getting over the summer. But it's pretty clear that she simply emerged as somebody who did not put a good face on this movement. And so, I mean, frankly, Cenk doesn't put a very good face on it either, but it seems they made the executive decision. I don't know if he's running it or what. Brianna Wu seems to have been involved in this PAC before Cenk came on board. So I don't know if it was a project that she started that he eventually came on board with, or if they decided they're going to relaunch this project in, you know, because the goals of it were different previously, but it has been used to the end of funding centrist candidates in the past. And in a sense, that's what's happening here, although it's supposedly more focused on populism. So Cenk is trying to re-articulate what the Democratic Party views as important. That's as if you take this project as, you know, actually trying to achieve its stated goals and not some kind of grift, which I think it very well could be. I mean, I do think the goal of the organization is to achieve what Cenk says he's trying to achieve. Doesn't mean that if it fails or if it doesn't pick up the momentum that it needs to, that it won't be sort of reconfigured into some way for Cenk to pay off some debts or whatever. I mean, that kind of corruption is part and parcel of the Democratic Party. So that's largely what I want to point to here, because there's a lot of things going on in terms of the donor structure and the power structure of the Democratic Party, which this rebellion PAC is supposedly aimed at combating, right? The current existing, the establishment of the Democratic Party. However, I think if I had to trace Brianna Wu being pushed out here to one thing in particular, to me, it has to be Israel-Palestine. And I pointed this out in my last video, where one of these planks on the 6 planks that candidates have to agree to in order to be, beneficiaries of this PAC, one of them is no more wars, which is odd because Cenk made it pretty clear that these are bills that are supposed to be passed. These aren't supposed to be like general policy statements that you agree with. These are supposed to be specific bills that get passed. That's the whole point of these 6 different planks. So no more wars is just a weird thing to put on there. And when it comes to the issue of Israel-Palestine, that is not sufficient as a policy plank. It's not. Because, as I pointed out in the last video, support for Israel as it stands right now means sending Israel weapons, which are going to be used to continue to wipe out civilians in Gaza. So, as of right now, supporting Israel is, by definition, not an anti-war position. It's a pro-war position. If you support Israel right now, of all times, that means you're actively supporting a war. And you could argue that's what it means in general to support Israel. But even without making that point, certainly right now, you cannot be a candidate who is pro-Israel and also be anti-war. Those things contradict. So it's enough of a problem that you would have to deal with that with these various candidates that you're vetting. It makes it more of a problem that one of the people who's doing the vetting is a pro-Israel zealot, very public about it. On the, left, Democratic Party, someone who participates in Democratic Party politics, who is vociferously pro-Israel. Not like that's unusual or anything. So that right there was something that didn't make any sense as a structure for this thing. So it's not that surprising that Brianna Wu has opted out. And she did give her little excuse, but at the same time, that's not, why would you announce it a day later after there's a bunch of backlash about you being included? I mean, that's bullshit. Obviously, the pressure was too much. And although Cenk usually does like to seek attention with these things, seems like they decided it was a better move for her not to be involved and for them to just move forward with the project. So another thing that's going on, David Hogg, who was involved in, I believe, the Parkland shooting years ago. He was one of the kids who survived and became an activist. There was a group of kids from this school that went on to become activists in the Democratic Party because they witnessed an incredibly gruesome school shooting. So David Hogg was one of those people. He has been involved in politics in various ways since then with varying levels of prominence. And he has found his way to a DNC vice chair position, which is pretty high up. And so he has some sway within the Democratic Party. Now, historically, he's been pretty liberal, pretty like resistance liberal style of politics back when Trump was first in office, and then during Biden's administration as well. However, in the past few years, he kind of seems to have made a shift where something has radicalized him. I can't remember exactly what it was, but probably some of the failures of Biden's administration caused him to become more radicalized against this sort of like liberal order of doing things, playing by the rules, and stifling your own ability to govern with arbitrary bureaucracy. And so David Hogg became more frustrated with that and started to sort of adopt some more left-wing positions and rhetoric. And so what he has done is he's decided, he said I think a week ago, that he is going to spend millions of dollars to primary Democratic leaders and people who are already in power in Congress and whatnot that are asleep at the wheel, as he puts it. And so these are the kind of threats that have been made by a few different people who basically want to try to reshape the party from the inside. AOC would be another example of the same kind of strategy. She has effectively utilized the primary strategy, although she has had to tone that down a little bit because she was brought to heel a little bit by the party. And so she's done that less and less. And the problem with this strategy, although it is effective in putting some fire under the asses of some of these incumbent Democrats, the problem is that the party is going to fight you back as hard as it can. And AOC has seen this where, at the top position that she worked her way to, where she was up against Jerry Connolly for the top oversight position in the Democratic Congress, which she should be in the House minority as it is right now. She should be in that position, but the Democratic establishment, so to speak, voted in Jerry Connolly as well. Why? Because he's a part of their system. It was his turn, as they tend to see things. And so the younger candidate got pushed away in favor of this old dinosaur candidate. And so now those same machinations are being utilized against David Hogg, where they essentially are going to put a rule in that says that officers of the DNC are not allowed to participate in primaries. So this would be specifically targeted at people like David Hogg, who are not elected officials, but are a part of the democratic process, the Democratic Party process, and basically saying that he cannot be involved in races the way he wants to. So that would either force him out of his position as it stands, or make it so that if he stayed in his position, he would not be able to exert pressure on the Democratic Party in that way. Now, he has said that he is willing to lose his chair over this, and so it sounds like, based on what he was initially saying about it, that he would be willing to take this further and, actually do it whether or not he remains part of the DNC. So that's the kind of energy we need from people like David Hogg. Do I think he's going to be able to have the power to exert those primary threats if he's not actively a part of this delegation? I think probably, because he's a prominent figure without that. He never really needed the DNC technically to be a prominent person in politics. And I think that if he takes the right positions when it comes to progressivism, don't know where he stands on Israel-Palestine, and again, that I think is the most important wedge in the Democratic coalition right now, and especially if he's being alienated from the establishment, so to speak, being on the wrong side of that issue is a great way to be rejected by the people that you need to support you in order to pull off some kind of successful rebellion against the Democratic Party. And so that is why it's a good thing that rebellionpac got rid of Brianna Wu, because as untrustworthy as I also think Cenk is, without her specifically, the PAC has a much better chance at having a positive impact, which I think with her, it just made it an impossibility. And so David Hogg is going to be up against the same thing. He says he's willing to lose his chair over this and try to pull out this same mission on his own with these primary challenges and make an impact that way. Look, he can do that. You're allowed to do that. It's a matter of if you have the ability to fundraise. And that's what AOC is good at, that makes her threatening in these primary challenges, is she can fundraise. And so, her endorsement of a candidate or working for a candidate, her using her organizing infrastructure to help a candidate is, enormously impactful. So it would be cool if David Hogg were to take on that level of activism and do it effectively. I think he has the fire in him to do it, but I also think he needs to make sure that he adopts, the positions that are going to make the base that he needs to support him actually carry him through. And oftentimes, there's plenty of things that can get in the way of that. And so the last thing that I think ties all of these together is Trump going after Act Blue. So Trump has, issued a memorandum, not an executive order, an executive memorandum, basically saying that he wants Pam Bondi to investigate Act Blue. They are accusing Act Blue of basically fraudulent donations and facilitating fraudulent donations and accepting donations from overseas IP addresses and not reporting it and that sort of thing. So there were some accusations made that Act Blue, that there was money flowing through Act Blue from foreign sources, and those accusations were brought up and investigated by Act Blue, and they did something about it. And so Act Blue, it's important to recognize that Act Blue is not an organization that raises money. They facilitate DNC and Democratic, basically anybody who's connected to the Democratic Party in any way. It facilitates for them to raise money more easily. And that includes everything from Hillary Clinton's campaign, Joe Biden's campaign, to DSA. Anything that's connected to the Democratic Party at all goes through Act Blue. Not 100%, but it's huge. So it's a part of their fundraising infrastructure. And that's what Trump is going after here. They are trying to break apart the fundraising infrastructure of the Democratic Party. Not going to stop, individual parts of the Democratic Party from raising money, but they want to make it less organized. And they're trying to do it under the guise of corruption, that there's all this corruption going on. And Elon Musk said it's because George Soros and all these, terrible people are funders of Act Blue, which doesn't make sense because they are not. Act Blue is not something that you fund. It is something that money flows through. So maybe he's accusing them of being the people who actually fund the operation of Act Blue. I don't know. They always accuse George Soros of doing everything. He's the puppet master. I mean, he doesn't have that much money. Elon Musk is so many times richer than George Soros. It's like hilarious at this point. So, that's the idea, is to use corruption as the means to break apart this fundraising infrastructure, which is enormously powerful. And ever since Obama, the Democrats have had a very sophisticated online fundraising infrastructure that was part of what helped Obama win. And once he became the mainstream Democratic candidate and then the president, all of that was folded into the Democratic Party operation. The same thing actually happened with Bernie Sanders to an extent, even though he didn't win. And a lot of his fundraising is also set up through Act Blue. So this is relevant to both of these previous stories because Rebellion PAC is partially attached to Act Blue. When I went to their website, it says that if you have an Act Blue account set up, your donation goes through right away. So they're set up through Act Blue, and any type of fundraising that David Hogg would be doing in order to primary candidates and try to take over the Democratic Party would probably have to be done through Act Blue. Now, that doesn't mean that those operations or DSA or anybody that was fundraising through them are totally ass up now. That's actually not what it means at all. It means that the infrastructure, the establishment, if you will, of the Democratic Party's fundraising is at least attempting to be upended by the Trump administration. And so that could lead to all sorts of things. It could lead to nothing. Pam Bondi apparently has to report back about this in 180 days to Trump. So she could report back with nothing. She probably is going to find something to put in the report that makes it sound like they did something. If there's nothing there that they can go after, then they probably will just move on to other things. But if there is any they're going to use it to try to break up the entire operation. And I think that is going to create opportunity as well. In as far as we're talking about the Democratic establishment, that's what Cenk is always talking about in his plans for Rebellion PAC and that sort of thing. It's the Democratic establishment. That's what the populists have to go against, is the Democratic establishment. Well, Act Blue is definitely, in as far as anything is part of the Democratic establishment, Act Blue is part of it. And it's a good example, too, of how the word establishment isn't a good blanket term for everything that's bad, because, going after the Democratic establishment might lead you to going after Act Blue, but that also includes DSA and other fringe organizing vehicles that actually need to raise money and do make a positive impact that isn't going to the Democratic Party. And that's what they really want to go after. They really want to go after Bernie Sanders and DSA, and those are the groups that they're going to focus on when they're doing this investigation. They're going to say, oh, these pro-Palestine groups, these socialist groups, these are communists, and they're blah, blah, blah. So probably the most likely scenario is that those type of entities, the DSAs and the pro-Palestine groups, those are going to be alienated by Act Blue as a concession to the Trump administration. That's the most likely outcome. But like I said, that creates opportunity for new organizations and new fundraising vehicles to crop up that don't prop up the Democratic Party in the same way. And again, Act Blue is part of the Democratic establishment in a way that isn't necessarily bad. But the further that piece of the establishment erodes, the more new things are going to have to form in order to achieve the same goals. And that is where some opportunity lies.
If you like this video, please like and subscribe. And if you really want to support, consider becoming a member. It's the best way to support this channel. I'm posting all kinds of exclusive content there, like podcasts that don't make it to the main page, podcasts about more general things, book reviews, movie reviews, different stuff like that. I'm also dropping music early on there. I got an EP coming out called Dead Internet Theory. That's going to be out in the next week or so. You can hear that early as a member. Also, all the beats, if you like the beats in this podcast, all of that are posted there and more. If there's other stuff you'd like to hear as exclusive content, let me know and we'll work some things out.